Well, for the smile we are going to make use of the damp standard brush and an option we saw in the past video called Lazy Mouse. We go again to Stroke, Lazy Mouse, and activate the option. What makes the Lazy Mouse option is to allow us to have a greater control of the quality of the line, that is, how fine the line is going to look. With respect to the other lines that we made freehand, it's very different to have a line like this than to have a line like this one. This one looks much more irregular since this one was done by freehand. We don't have a very precise control, while thanks to the option Lazy Mouse we have a better control when making the line. And that's what we are going to need when we are doing the smile. The higher the value of the Lazy Mouse, the longer the line will appear after we make the brush stroke. As you see, at this moment I made a line, but the stroke has not yet appeared. The longer you make it, the better the line will appear. It is this red line that allows us to have as much control as possible. We are going to take off all our mesh, and we'll use our last subdivision. If your PC allows you to have more than 6 subdivisions, it is excellent to hear it, since it is really quite useful. However, that will also cause the PC to stick much more. But well, going on, hide what we don't need, and start making the line. As you can see, even though I'm not having good control of the pulse of my hand, Lazy Mouse option allows me a much more continuous line, much more definite, and gives me a better finish. We can use the standard brush, and also make use of the brush move to begin to modify the shape of the line of the smile, and also to organize the curvature of the mouth. We will sort these points out as the opportunity presents itself. For example, here we can fix these holes. We can add some geometry in case we need. And so we are converting this type of holes. Perfect. With the brush edge polish, we can organize that type of lumps that we don't want. For example, something irregular appears here, so we can move that part. Again, edge polish. And finally, we are going to fix this curvature. The idea is to make the whole mouth curve. Well, let's organize it little by little. Well, I think it's looking much better. With more time and work we will begin to organize this type of lamps, and things do not look good. The idea is simply to try to have the curve as perfect as possible. Finally, when we stretch the lips, the commissure, this part of here begins to swell. Let's see a little with the rest of the body how it is seen. We can stretch the commissure a little more. It is not that the smile follows a straight line, but rather it is embedded in the cheekbones, checks, and makes it inflame or swell. In case we want to exaggerate it a little more, we will use a standard brush. We have to take care that these folds will not be seen much here. Here is where the crease of the cheek is made. Let's try to not make them to be so inflamed. And finally, with the damn standard brush we can start polishing this line here, but this time we will turn off the stroke option. Since it's such a small area, we will hardly be able to move using the lazy mouse. Let's turn off the lazy mouse option for a moment. And here we are going to make the cheek slidey. Okay, done. Here, for example, it's all too much. This is what I told you, we had to avoid. To avoid to do it too swollen and too irregular, what we can do is to inflate the areas around and start to soften. With that we have the form of the smile and the cheekbones. This is all for now, and see you in the next video. Well, with this, we finish the foot and the fingers. We have the wrinkles. We already have the glove of the character almost complete. The tips I can give you to finish this character, or at least in the part of the glove, are: first, to evenly match the size and thickness of the brush. It is true that by the type of material the wrinkles tend to be very even. However, subtle changes in the size of the brush can help to look a little better. We see that not all strokes are the same size, and that helps make it to look much better. The second is to take into account the three forms that we had already seen before to make the brush strokes. So what we can do is 1, 2, 3, and from here make the extra brush strokes. When we also make the lines with the damp standard brush, we can change the intensity and size of the brush, so that some openings or some wrinkles are much deeper than the others. We can also use standard brushes to make certain areas a little deeper. For example, I choose to make these corners a little deeper. This. And for that I use the standard brush. And finally, in case the crevices or stripes that divide a wrinkle from the other are very separated, or they make them see that the wrinkles are very separated, you can always use the inflate brush to start to join these sides. For example, this, if we use the inflate brush, we see that they come together much more. Obviously I overdone here, but you can always use that type of tools to generate a closer approach between wrinkles. Well, I hope this video has helped you and served as a guide to build the wrinkles of your own character. In the next video we are going to give the final finishes to the glove. See you in the next video. Very well, now that we have arrived at this point, that is to say the third stage of our sculpture, we'll begin to add some extra details, such as gloves or boots, which are somehow the most notorious features. This time we are going to use the subtool panel. We are going to add another piece. We will stand in the piece that we need, in this case the cylinder, and we are going to rotate it for our character. In this case, we will not use the transpose, but we will use the tools of the formation panel. We are going to use rotate, but we must take into account the axis in which we are going to rotate it. In this case, the Z-axis is activated. In this case, it doesn't work well. We turn on the X-axis. And we will rotate it 90 degrees. With that, we already have the boot, and we can see simply lower the size. With transparency we can see the character. We will try to adjust this boot as accurately as the size of the boot. Let's look at the concept to see more or less what position the boot is. Making an estimate here, I think this is the first joint. Here is the second. The third joint will be where the glove begins. So if here is the first joint, here will be the second. Here is more or less the point where the glove should be. Well, here we see that it's very close to the size of the character's foot. Let's see how the height is. This glove is about the same size as a joint. Then this glove should be the same size as this joint. I think that's fine. But let's turn this glove to Dynamesh. Okay, done. What we are going to do in this case is that we are going to use the insertion brushes. Let's resize. And let's regenerate. Taking this finger as sample, we will form other one here. As you see, the finger starts thinning and becomes wider. But we see that the broadest part is at the bottom, or the most curved as the bottom of the finger. That is what we are going to try to generate here. Remember to see your character from different angles to complete the sculpture. And here we have the first finger of our character. A good curve here, and the most curved part here. That kind of irregularities, which on the one hand looks a bit different from the other, we will be fixed them gradually. With this we have finished one of the fingers of the character, and now you have the ability to do the other two. Again, I will do this in quick motion, so the video doesn't become very extensive, but with the same technique we are going to generate the other two fingers. One thing to keep in mind is that the idea is to put the fingers in this direction. One in this way, the second stay in this direction, and the other will be in this direction. Somehow this finger from here will simulate being the thumb of our character. As you can see, in some way the character has a somewhat human shape of the hands. And that's the behavior we want to reflect here, so I'm going to overtake the video until we get to that point. And that's it. Basically, we make the full character. We see that he already has his hand. We need to fix it, but I'll let we already generate another piece of our character. Now that you have used the technique to generate the fingers, we already have a more complete character. In the next video, we will take the glove that we have here and we will copy it to the other side. So, see you in the next video. Well, as we did with the glove, we are going to start adding some extra details on our boot. We are going to do everything with tools you have already learned. The first thing is that we are going to increase some subdivisions until reaching the top, and by means of the max tool and the lasso option, we are going to generate a fat stroke like the one we are going to see. Okay, done. It's better. We will make the line more solid. It looks much thinner, and again we will blur it again. This to make the line look much more even. We will invert, and then with the tool inflate, this one, we will give it a value of 2 to generate a small level here. With this we don't make our object look so flat. Let's smooth out in case you see this type of irregularities. Well, we already have another piece, and using the same method we will add a line here. In this case it will be done with the rectangular tool. Let's put it here. Soften this line. Now we are going to generate some extra traces, some lines like this one, but we are no longer going to use the damn standard brush and lazy mouse option, but we are going to do it with the mask. We are going to generate a line here and another one up here. We are going to blur it, invert, and in this case we are going to make an inflate but inward. In this case of -3. We can blur a little in case the edge have become very stiff. We max here first and soft. The same thing up here. And now we are going to fix a little more here. We are going to do the mask again, but in this case, to make it easier, we are going to lower some subdivisions. 4 might be okay. We blur it again a little, and in this case we don't use the option inflate, but with the brush we will make this shape a little more irregular. With Move, we can organize the form a little bit more. And that's it. We already have one more piece. And again, we increase the subdivisions and we will make a feature that the boots of our concept have, which is this line. We are going to make the line we can use for this the stroke option, I mean the lazy mouse option, to give us much more precision. We started from this line that we already had here, we come down here, we stop here. I would like to do this with a single line, but since the view is not going to allow me, I will have to make small fragments of the layout. This line here, for example, and that's it. We already have another line that's just a bit crooked, but to avoid having to do another part of the line again, we can simply lower some subdivisions, and with the move brush we can organize the form. Okay, I do think that show it works. Finally, we're going to do two things. The first is that, for example, we're going to fix this curvature here, which doesn't look very good, lowering some subdivisions, protect this area, and we are going to curve this better, in a better way. And done. The second thing to do is to make use of exactly the same noise tool we use for the glove and give some texture for this piece here. Let's blur it a little. Remember to increase the subdivision level to the maximum so that noise quality is not affected in the least, and that is the best that can be obtained. Let's go to noise, surface. Just like it is by default to me, I think it's fine. You can try other kind of noise of other sizes. I will leave it here with this one. And apply this here, let it be completely engraved. As you can see, this technique with the lazy mouse option and the damp standard brush is very good for making very defined lines. It allows to give you traits in a very fast way so that it looks better and doesn't look so saturated. I hope you liked this video, and I will see you in the next. See you! For this video, we will make the boots of our character. And we will use exactly the same technique that we use for the hands. We are just going to add a new subtool. I recommend that for each subtool that you create, name it, just to avoid getting lost while you move on the project. Let's add another subtool. And as we did in the last video, let's deform it. Then we will rotate this object, in this case in the x-axis. If we hold down Alt and press any subtool, we select it directly. And so we don't have to go to the subtool panel. Another way to do this is to simply press the key N, and we will get the screen where we will find all the subtools we are using. Let's stand in the cylinder, and now we are going to rotate it. Remember that it's on the x-axis. This button is a bit difficult to click. Again, we click on size. The good thing is that we already have the front boot or the front glove. So with it we can give us an idea of the approximate size of the other. And for this occasion, we will do it directly on the left side so that when we activate symmetry, copy it on the right side without any inconvenience. Well, here we see that there is going to be a bit of trouble with the other pieces of our character. In this case, the feathers, but we can polish that later, do not worry. Let's activate Ghost option. Let's remove the transparency and accommodate this boot. What we are going to do in later videos is that we are going to reaccommodate the foot a little so we are not going to have any problem. We turn it into zero measure. Okay, done. And here in this case, as we don't have to create fingers, we will use mask to generate the shape of the shoe. Let's use the transpose. You have to be very alert with that height of the shoe. Let's see. The shoe goes from here to here. And the height from here to here. Well, we see that it is a little bigger the lower part of the shoe than the top. We scratch a little here and here. And yes, it's actually a little bigger. This is why I mentioned that it is important that not only learn the technical part of the software, but also understand some concepts such as disproportion of distance, because it helps us know the approximate size of the piece. Here, in this case, if we say that this is the center, is almost the same size as here. The only difference is that according to the other boot, both the starting part and the end part have the same height, while here they are a fall. Let's sort those details out. Well, I don't know if it is a matter of perspective, but it seems that the food behaves in this way. If we see it from the top, we see that it's not quite straight, but it becomes a little wider. Something like this. So let's start to organize it. The front has to be rounded. Well, here we have a slope that we have to fix. For these boots, we could use the reference of some baby shoes, since they have a very similar shape. In those cases, if we look at it from here, the outside looks more curved. And the inside has a kind of cavity. That is, it has this curve. Let's look again at the reference. We see that this part, for example, shouldn't be so straight, but should have a certain curve. If we see it here, it goes in and then it comes out again. So we need it goes in and then it comes out again. And to finish, we see that the back is not completely straight, but has a certain curvature. We are going to generate that here too. And I will say that the boot as it is works well. Looks pretty good. Let's remove the solo and okay, we have the boot of our character. For this case we are not going to make it into our zero measure yet. For now we will only copy it from the other side and when we are editing we will convert it into zero measure. Modify topology and mirror and weld. And done. With this we have the boot of our character. The reason why I say that we shouldn't make this piece specific in zero measure is because we still have to do the bottom of the sole of the shoe, and for that we can use a different subtool or we can use an insertion brush, and that we will do it when we are editing. For now this is everything. See you in the next video. As I said in the previous video, we are going to take the pieces we have imported or recycled and we are going to start shaping them to suit our character. In this case we see that they are too small, so we have to start modify them. The first thing is that you have to take all the subtools and leave them in their minimum subdivisions, in the lowest subdivision. And not to have to do it with each one, we simply go to the all low option. That makes all the subtool go to its lowest level. We will just go one by one of the subtools and we will modify them. Let's start with the leech, the belt. It looks very small, of course. And the first thing we are going to do is make it bigger. The move brush is going to be our best companion in this case because we are simply going to accommodate proportions or sizes. For example, it's very loose here. We're going to organize it. This accommodating can be an annoying job, but it really helps a lot to avoid downtime. If we can save time and make our character look good, it's okay to do these kind of things. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, I see it's much better this way. It's a smaller size, but it fits. Let's go with the next piece. This one here. The transpose is going to work a lot here too. Seeing the symmetry, we're going to start modifying. Let's go to the subtool of the body and we will hide what is useless for us, which is here and the body. Back on the belt again. For example, we see here there is a void, so that kind of thing we have to start fixing them too. Okay, alright, let's get back to this piece. And we're done fitting it in. Okay, done. Let's go to the next piece. Here in this case you have to order the symmetry. A curious fact is that not always all the subtools have the same symmetry. Some symmetries are not always well imported. For example, this has symmetry up and down, but it has the opposite side. That is where we need it. Let's go to the transform panel. And activate the X symmetry, deactivating the other two. Okay, we already have another piece. Let's move on the next one. The breastplate here. Let's go back to the body. and take out what we need. For example, we are going to make this brace pole here. I insist, it takes a lot of time to modify this type of pieces because not everything you recycle will be 100% accurate to our character, so you have to start modifying some pieces. Let's go to the next one. Let's go to the next one. That one needs a bigger size too. Well, we have these pieces. This one, the belt. We have these three pieces, 1, 2, and 3, which make up our character. Let's go now with the buttons. As I said before, not all the pieces you import have the same active symmetry. You have to be very careful with that. Again, we have to go over some pieces to start refining them. This piece is missing here. What we are doing here is to accommodate the pieces. In the next video, we will just refine the pieces. Okay, done. With this, we already slightly molded all the pieces that make up our character. We import them, and we already have a more complete character without having to wear ourselves out so much in modeling each of the pieces. That is why recycling seems to me to be a technique that few teach, and that's very important. Our task also consists of optimizing the best we can the resources that we have at our disposal. For example, usually export the parts that I create for any project as a C-tool file, in case I'm going to use them in future. On the internet you can find packs, not only from C-tools but also from other types of files that have pieces to generate new compositions or sculptures. These type of procedures are very useful and will help you to generate good projects in a very short time. That's all for this video, and we'll see you the next time where we're going to take each of the pieces and we're going to improve them to our character. As I said in the previous video, we will start to do the wrinkles of our character's globe. For that, here's a reference that I would like to explain to you before we begin. The first thing to look at in this photo is that the materials as strong as leather do not allow a lot of wrinkles. That's because the material is so hard that it prevents folds as the fabric will do. Avoid having so many folds. However, here we see that it has some folds, and usually the shape of those folds come three. The first is the Z or the S that we see here, just here. The second is the Y, which is something like this, and we see it here. The third is the X. It goes like this, more or less. That will come to be a form like the one we see here. Since in some way the other forms begin to take off, that is also valid. However, these three forms are the most common when it comes to wrinkling. The idea is also to make irregular strokes. They are not going to be totally right. But they are going to have some divisions or some curves, and that is what we will try to do in our globe. To do this, the first thing is to go to a fifth subdivision, to have more polygons and a higher quality in detail. And the second is that we will use two brushes. First, the standard brush or the inflate. I prefer the standard to make the folds, but either is valid. With a single stroke, we make a fold. The same, for example, here we make this one come out and be divided here. As I told you, in a Y shape. We can do some wrinkles here on the sides of the finger. Making wrinkles is quite exhausting and we will need a lot of patience. The truth, when I was starting as an artist, I stressed out doing these wrinkles because I never did them well. Well, the idea is that the wrinkles do not look very small, but always have a good size. I don't like this. Let's make one that's wrinkled here, and another here. I think with this, it is more than enough. Once we have the wrinkles we want, which obviously takes a long time to do, we use the brush dam standard to make the cavities a little deeper. That is, using the dam standard brush and the stroke, we will make the lines look deeper, as if somehow they were falling over the folds. We soften if we have to, and we see, for example, that the line is deeper here. But this is only going to be done to certain wrinkles. Not all will have this level of depth, and in fact only a few looks deep here. I mean in the part where they connect. For example, this wrinkle and this wrinkle are connected here. This is where there is a greater level of depth. And the line fades until it disappears. For example, here, we could make it a little deeper. Here we see a cavity that are, for example, like this. And we see that the line is not totally continuous, but it fades until it disappears. It no longer looks so dark, so shady. It doesn't look so deep. That's what we want to do here. Let's do this last one and done. Okay, let's do this one here. This is the last one. Finally, what we are going to do is remove this form from the strokes. It looks like some spheres. It doesn't look very continuous line, so what I suggest here is first go down to a subdivision level of 4, and then with the smooth brush we can begin to reduce these artifact levels. Why do this on the lowest level and not the highest? It is because the smooth brush is not able to smooth enough levels of subdivision very high. This happens because as these levels have so many polygons, with the brush it is much harder to smooth all these volumes. So what we do is first soften it at the lowest level or at the level that is the best, in this case the 4 level, again go to subdivision level 5 and soften again. In this way it is much easier to eliminate these imperfections. For example, here is already beginning lost a lot, but that could be easily fixed. And after we have removed those imperfections, we can reuse the standard brush to polish what we had already lost. Polish these lines. Oops, my bad. And smooth again. Okay, done. Believe me when I tell you that you are going to practicing with this a lot, because doing wrinkles is really, really hard. It takes a lot of time, a lot of patience. Okay, I think we can leave it here. In the next video we will do a time lapse to do the wrinkles to the other 2 fingers. This is all for the video and see you in the next. Well, in this video we are going to finish fixing the pieces of the character. The video can become a bit long, but these are things that you are able to do right now, because you know the technique. You know that it's very simple to modify it, then there should be no problem for that part. I recommend that you leave the character or the main body of the character in a good level of subdivisions. For example, 3 or 4 subdivisions to be more precise and know how the pieces are going to look about the character and how deep the pieces are going to look. We can leave it at that and we'll just go for each of the pieces. I recommend you name them again in case they don't have a name. Name them so that it's much easier to find them. With the bell, try to keep all the pieces the same distance. All these edges cannot look thicker than others. The idea is that it looks very even. Well, I think we can leave this bell like that. And then let's go with the other piece. For example, here this piece must be repaired, since it got damaged. The C-polish brush can help us in this case, as it can help us flatten these areas much more. First we are going to leave them at the same level, and then we start flattening out. Just a moment. Just one moment. As we will need these pieces to be flattened, we can use a polish. And with a good subdivision. For example, the sculpture brings 4 subdivisions by default. If we look at it at one, we see that it's already much flatter. And again, we lower the subdivisions to make them thick. For example, this is very high. Not to mention that it was on the outside of the skin. Let's turn off this piece from here, just for a moment. And let's organize the size. Alright, this piece is already much more organized. Let's go to the next one. This is a lot of work. We had already fixed this one a little, but then we'll finish refining it. Alright, okay, this is a little crooked. Let's organize it a little better. I think that's good enough. Well, here you can see some lumps, but that can be fixed with the silk polish brush. Why is this going through? Okay, done. The last thing we need is to organize the piece that we had already hidden. This one. The zipper. Let's make sure that this distance is very even, if possible the same. And let the zipper completely cover the belt. Let's see how it looks if we go up the subdivisions to the maximum with the all high option. And now going up all the subtools with all high, we see that it already looks better. It looks a lot like what we need. Well, this time lapse was a bit long, but I hope it has helped you to learn the importance of starting to save all your projects, all the inputs that we believe, and reuse them, modify them, and put them in new projects to make them even better. This is all for the video, and I will see you in the next. Now that we have a much cleaner and much more organized mesh, we can give to our character the last detail that is missing, the nose. We are going to hide what we don't need, and we are going to first polish this area, a fast smoothing, and we noticed that before we couldn't smooth due the amount of polygons it had. Now we can modify it. Well, okay, what we are going to do is to organize the 4 nostrils, and for that we are going to use the damn standard brush to draw the shape of the nose. In case you have the option lazy mouse active, what we can do is to lower the level of lazy radius so that the line doesn't extend so much. Well, according to this, the nose is going to be something like this. The bottom one seems to be bigger than the top one, although I may have exaggerated a little bit here, but you can see that it is a bit bigger here. Let's do it here. Okay. And the second one is less curved than the first. Okay, let's see here. If this is the commissure of the mouth and this is the eye, the nose starts almost in the center, that is more or less here. A little bit over here. And the other one is almost reaching the eye, or at least the eyelid. Well, this one is a little wider. It's fine. And then we have the drawing of the nostrils. What we are going to do now is that to make it much easier, we are going to lower a couple of subdivisions, maybe just one, and with the standard brush, it could be, we are going to begin to obstruct this part inwards. We are going to make some masks here. And then we're gonna start to taking it out. Okay, with that we have the nostrils. We are going up a subdivision, and let's move this line a little bit. Well, as I said, we already have the nostrils. One important thing here is that this aperture doesn't become very deep. The idea is that it might not be a hole, but it looks slightly deeper. As you can see, we already built the nostrils. We could fix a little the shape with the brush move, but there is no problem. However, there is a detail that this concept doesn't give us, and that some references do have. For example, this show us that, for example, here there is a small relief. There is like a kind of lump in this area around the nostril. The other example also tells us the same thing. We see here an obstruction, and that is a trait that you would like to give to the character, but let's give it to him on this side. In other words, the upper part of the nostril will be the one with the obstruction, and the lower part will have a very minimal one. For that, we are going to use the inflate brush, and we are going to inflate this whole area, this area. We are going to soften a little. The idea is that we are going to inflate this whole part here and this one here. This one here we are going to inflate it, but very slightly and with a much thinner line. Let's refine here a little bit and make the bottom line. As I said, this line has to be very thin. Well, there it looks good. It's thinner. And now what we are going to do is that with the C polish brush, we are going to try to avoid some internal bumps as we can. I will show you what I mean. For example, we are going to sharpen in some way the inner part of the nose, avoiding spikes like this. Let's flatten this area a little more. Okay, done. Finally, we can use the damp standard brush again to generate a very thin line here at the edge of the nose, so that it looks a little more defined. We'll soften slightly. And we already see that this part looks much more defined. We're gonna do the same with the top one. Try not to make the line too hard so that it's very easy to erase. Let's move here slowly, very gently. to have a slightly more defined nose. We could do the same thing down here. And we're gonna do it down here too. One last thing is that we can use the move brush to try to organize the height of the nose. We can use a mask in this case, so that is much easier to organize this height. Okay, done. Well, it will only be missing, in this case, to smooth the areas that we think are very uneven. For example, this one here. We will do it using polish and smooth. We will try to match as much as possible. Okay. So, now we have the nose of our character. It has some details, some levels, and is more polished than it was before, of course. With that feature, the character's face is now officially ready, is done. We see that it looks much better now that he has the nose. And now all that remains is to give him a final approach to the concept. What we are going to do in the next video is that we are going to organize a little more the proportions in general of the character. This is all for the video, I hope you like it, and I will see you in the next. Well, now that we have our character with new proportions closer to the concept, it is time to give him a more dynamic pose so he doesn't look so rigid. For that, as always, it is good to have references to give us some ideas and some inspirations of what kind of pose we are going to use. My concepts are going to be, for example, those of dogs, these pictures, and some concepts that give us some ideas that we can use. And although I would like to use my concept as a reference for the pose, I think it can be a little complicated, so rather let's just stick with the ones we had. So we are going to start. Again, we are going to do Z plugin and T-Mouse Mesh. Keep in mind that before we do this kind of thing, we have to save the original poses that we had, and for this moment we should have two poses, the initial one with the big proportions and this secondary one with the shortest proportions. Okay, done? Unfortunately, symmetry is no longer going to work as well as it did before, because since we are going to make the character more asymmetrical, obviously it doesn't work. So that this video doesn't get too long, I'm going to give you the basic tips for doing this kind of poses, or what I think are very important tips. When we are going to pose, we're gonna do a time lapse. In this case, what we're going to do is that when we make the mask, we're going to do them right where the joints are. We're not going to bend our character anyway. We always have to keep in mind where the joints are. We shouldn't bend anywhere, and we always have to keep in mind in some way where the joints are. The second, and what I will think is more important, is to keep in mind which are the most important or the biggest areas when making some modifications. This to save time. For example, let's say I modify the arm and give it a pose, and then I think about modifying the torso. And when I give the pose to the torso, I also deform what I had in mind for the arm. What will happen next is that I will have to reshape his arm to accommodate the new pose, and that can make it a little more difficult, and it could also take longer. Finally, keep in mind the help that polygroups can give us. In the ZBrush Basic course, I teach how polygroups are used and the importance of this. What I suggest in that we hide the pieces we don't need to avoid certain problems. For example, in case we want to move our arms, we can hide parts of the armor and leave only what we are going to move. This is so that we don't get the deformed too much. With these clarifications and these concepts on my part, we will begin to modify our character. Well, finally, after a long time of work, a very good time of work, we have the pose of our character. We see that now it no longer looks so symmetrical, so still, or completely static, but it looks a little livelier. He's got a little more life. It takes quite some time, it takes quite a lot of practice to generate ever better poses, but we finally have our characters one. Important tips to keep in mind are: first, use the polygroups a lot. During the time-lapse, you notice that many times I hide certain pieces of our character so that it could facilitate the task of masking or moving. Another tip is to keep in mind which points can be bent. The joints are one of the key points when it comes to posing because they are the main parts where the character is going to bend. Thinking also in which parts of the leg are going to be bent other than the joints. For example, the part of the legs was very possible to give some curvature so that it will accommodate much more to the pose I wanted to achieve. Also note the tails. Tails are very important. Make sure they are not completely symmetrical. Make variations. I know that it will take a long time, but it is important that the tails look alive. You have to make some variation to make the character look a little different. And well, with the pose of the character, we only lack one last thing. And it is simple to save the pose that we have. Okay, let's save the pose. This will be our pose number 3. And finally, apply. I really hope that the tools you have seen throughout the course will be useful to you. Each of these steps are very important to keep in mind, at least when you are learning how to use the tool, because they will give you a very good guide of how to generate your character without wasting so much time, and in a constant way so that your character looks better and better. I think that the basis you have learned so far will serve you very much to generate some very good quality characters in a very simple and very practical way. And now that we finally have our character with his pose, we are ready to finish this course, so I hope you learn a lot. See you in the next course.